I think that the title is the only introduction I need here. Much ink has been spilled over this idea of having been born in the wrong generation. I mean, maybe not ink, because a lot of what's been said about it has been typed and then presumably, hopefully, never printed. I mean, there was that one picture from like the 16th century or something that was talking about how the current generation have lost their way, and presumably that wasn't posted to Facebook. Fun fact, by the way, when I looked for that image, the first search result was this Wikipedia article on something called the General Crisis. I also wrote century instead of century, and that's fine. Anyway, turns out the general crisis is a specific thing, but when I first read it, I assumed that that term, the general crisis, is some term that I've never heard of that people use to describe what is often considered to be the general crisis, the youth of today. You know, the general crisis would be the declining standard since the good old days. Things used to be fantastic, but now everything's terrible, everything's violent, everyone's stupid, nobody has any dignity or self-respect, and since people have been saying this forever, you would assume that society must just be getting worse and worse and worse, even though when you actually look at a lot of meaningful, important metrics, it seems that society has actually been getting better. Anyway, so far this is all a pretty pedestrian observation that a lot of people are familiar with. People right now complain about the youth of today being much worse, but back when they were the youth of their day, the generation before them were complaining about them, and so on all throughout history. Therefore, these kind of complaints are probably illegitimate. If that was my point, then this video wouldn't be worth anyone's time because it's such an obvious point that many other people have made. However, I want to advance my highly controversial theory that actually, you know what? Maybe this time it's sort of true. I mean, consider those who advance the idea that the proliferation of online pornography is not an issue because people have always looked at porn. Is that even true? Like, yeah, okay, maybe there are some cave paintings and some other ancient paintings that appear to depict sexual acts, but I'm not convinced that people kept stacks of cave walls under their bed and would use them to get off, and even if they did, presumably their imagination would have had to have been doing a lot of the work there, which means that the utility of this media as pornography would be quite limited. I mean, it's trivial to point out that porn back in the day was radically different from what it is now, simply by considering for a second what it is now. It's on your phone. It's in your pocket. But in the 18th century, they had paintings with naked ladies in them. You have a device that can access the internet in your pocket. Well, in the 19th century, they had pictures of naked ladies, and some men would even carry them with them. You have a device that allows you to access billions of hours of high-definition pornography with just a few taps of your finger. But in the 20th century, you could go to a video store and you could rent out a pornographic movie. There are people right now skipping through some of the most hardcore extreme pornography tailored by an algorithm to their specific interests because they're so desensitized to it that even as they're watching it, they're bored by it. Like the other day, I was watching some shorts on my phone before bed because I just decided for once not to care about limiting screen time before I try to go to sleep, and a message popped up that was like, "Are you a straight man who can't stop watching gay porn?" My wife was like, why are you getting recommended that? I choose to believe it's because of my R-Traps gay video that I released a while back, but either way, clearly the algorithm thinks that I've got some big secrets. Anyway, unsurprisingly, the point of the video was if you watch lots and lots and lots of porn, then eventually you'll start watching gay porn even though you're not gay, because that feels more taboo and more extreme for you, and you're so desensitized to any porn that feels even slightly normal that you have to go way off the reservation. Now, I'm not sure if that specific point is true, but it's certainly true that many people are becoming totally desensitized to this stuff because of its abundance. There's this episode of Family Guy where Stewie and Brian try to wean Chris off of internet pornography by giving him a nudie magazine.
You have 28 windows of porn playing simultaneously?
Sometimes I pretend I'm at the security desk at the mall and everyone at the mall is banging each other. Wait, I'm clicking on this thumbnail but the video isn't opening.
No, that's a still image. So you look at them, and then your brain sort of creates a scene for you.
I mean, we're literally at a point now where looking at a magazine feels positively quaint. Like you'd see a guy jerking off to a pinup and be like, whoa, what are you, the Pope? Anyway, so that's just one particularly crude example of how, no, things aren't just the way they've always been. They are quite radically different now. And I guess if you want a thesis statement for this video, it would be that now that we live in the information age where everyone is using the internet all of the time for everything, I think this notion that the new generation might be the harbingers of doom for our society could have just a little bit more credibility to it. See, I guess part of what I need to do here is show that this is a new development and that it is significantly different from just the changes that have happened in the past. And while generally, of course, I've been talking about moral character so far, I want to just broaden things to the general experience of having been born in a particular generation. The specific use of the phrase the wrong generation is often by those who wish that they were born in a prior generation due to some idealized notion of what life was like back then, or maybe even just because they like the media from that time period. That latter point is very stupid because nowadays you can obviously still access all of that media, in fact possibly more of that media than you'd even have been able to access at the time, and then on top of that you can access all of the media from every other generation so far as well. Saying you actually wish you could have lived back then makes slightly more sense because obviously you can't just simulate that nowadays. Like, you can pretend it's the 60s and maybe even have a little social event where you invite a load of friends over to also pretend that it's the 60s, but you can't live your everyday life as if it's the 60s, and you can't expect everyone around you to be living as if it's the 60s unless it actually is the 60s. The big question then is, should you actually want to live your everyday life as if it's the 60s? Many people, of course, didn't have as many rights back then, so depending on who you are, you might be sacrificing some of your rights if you went back to the 60s. At least for some of this idealizing the past, it's people idealizing the lives of the incredibly wealthy back in the past because they were the only ones who had the education and the free time to actually substantially record their everyday experiences. Like, if you lived in ancient Rome, you probably wouldn't be a philosopher hanging out at the forum, you'd be a slave. It reminds me of that one post from this guy who posted an aristocratic bull from like the 1800s, and he was like, why don't we do this nowadays? There are plenty of events attended by the most famous, the most wealthy, the most powerful people in society. You're just not one of them. So those are some obvious issues with romanticizing the past. But here's the thing with me, right? I don't romanticize past generations, but I do pity future generations, meaning that in some sense, my position is the least defensible. I unironically think that I had the best childhood ever. I think I was born in the optimal time to have been a child and to have grown up. Because, okay, let me make this really simple here, right? I, Michael, was born in 1995. My dad, Lawrence, was born in 1965, so that's a nice round 30-year gap. His dad, Brian, was born in 1938, but you know what, just to keep it simple, we'll say he was born in 1935. And I don't even know when my great-granddad Edward was born, but we'll just say it was 1905, and that way we have 4 generations, each neatly separated by a 30-year gap. Unless my wife has something she's not told me, it's too late for me to have a child in 2025, but just to continue this separation of generations nice and evenly, we'll assume that I have a child this year. So that's a succession of childhoods from different generations, and I must say, a very nice collection of respectably British names. But here's my point, right? Okay, if you could choose one of those childhoods to have, I think that your options would get better and better with each new generation. Like, alright, imagine being born in 1905. We'll say that your childhood, therefore, would have been pretty much between 1910 and 1915. At that point, there are no films, books might have even been quite expensive, you probably wouldn't have had that many toys, it would be by no means an enviable childhood. Born in 1935, and first of all you've got the war to worry about, but ignoring that for a moment, books might have been slightly cheaper, you could actually even go to the movies and watch some black and white adventures for a shilling or so. But let's be honest, if you walked up to a kid and said, hey, I've got an option for you, how about you trade in all the things that you have right now and you can travel back to a time when your only entertainment would have been books and black and white films that you have to pay to see. They're not going to bite your hand off. Now, by 1965, you're growing up in the 70s, and suddenly things are looking significantly better. You've got comic books, they're a big thing now, and you can even watch the TV, perhaps even in color. Plastic has come about, so now companies can mass produce all sorts of much cheaper toys. That doesn't sound that bad. And then you get to me, born in 1995. I was a child from 2000 to 2005, with my youth more broadly extending into like 2010. I've now witnessed the next 15 to 20 years of technological advancement since my childhood ended, and I have to say, I didn't miss out on anything. There's nothing new that's come along that I'm like, oh man, I wish they had that when I was a kid. Toys? Lego isn't any better now than it was when I was a kid. Same for like action figures and stuff like that. It's also not any cheaper. Lego, if anything, is more expensive. Audio-visual entertainment? I mean, with the Star Wars prequels, the early Harry Potter films, the Lord of the Rings, it was clear we were at a point where CGI, while not perfect, was able to basically make any story, no matter how fantastical, come to life on the big screen. And video games. I mean, yeah, sure, the graphics weren't fantastic, but by the early 2000s, you could pretty much have a game about anything and it would at least be functional. The point is that there is nothing I could have conceivably wanted as a child that was denied to me based on me having been born too early. And I'm not saying that my dad's or my granddad's or my great-granddad's childhood was terrible by any means, but obviously there are some things that really enriched my childhood that weren't available to them. But what about Lil Prince Critical? Let's say that I did have a kid in 2025. Would he have any basis for saying, man, I'm glad I grew up now instead of in that antiquated time when dad grew up? Well, we'd have to cast our mind forward like 10 years to when his childhood would be over, but we've already seen the majority of the time between our two childhoods, and so far, how has society changed? Does it seem like society is moving in a good direction? As I see it, there are only 3 benefits a child could possibly experience in having been born later than I was. I mean, the first one is just because more time has passed, that means there's more stuff to enjoy. There are TV shows and films that I might have enjoyed as a kid, but they simply weren't around when I was growing up. But this doesn't really mean that much because, yeah, okay, there's more stuff, but it hasn't really exceeded the standard set by the early 2000s. The big difference is that tech is better. Obviously, you can see this with video games. Video game graphics are much better now, but I think everyone would agree that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is, can you have an entertaining story that's told through clever game mechanics? And that's not something that's really been improved on since the 2000s. I don't think CGI has got tremendously better, but it has got a lot cheaper, meaning we see it a lot more often. When I was growing up, TV shows couldn't have CGI. That was way too expensive, so they were very limited in the fantastical stories they could tell. I remember watching that old Kevin Sorbo Hercules TV show when I was a kid, and every single time that there was a monster he needed to fight, it would look like a Windows screensaver. But I caught up on some of those Star Wars TV shows recently for a video that I did for my media review channel. In fact, I will link that up here, and if you haven't seen it, you should go over there, you should give it a like, you should watch the whole thing, you should leave a comment so that the algorithm will show it some love. And while I'm speaking of love, I'll also thank those who support this channel by giving on Patreon. You're all very appreciated. Anyway, so in watching those shows, one of the things I thought is that it is pretty awesome that TV shows now can have special effects that exceed the standard of blockbusters when I was growing up. So that's everything, and I think you'd agree it's not that much compared to the fact that in the 20th century, each generation brought with it massive changes in terms of the typical childhood that would be available to someone. But from 1995 to 2025, it's all pretty much the same, just maybe smoother and prettier. There's only one thing that I would say is fundamentally different about the childhood of somebody growing up now compared to when I was growing up. It's a difference that I've already alluded to. Smartphones. I mean, more to the point, I'd say the rise of portable computers, the internet, and more specifically streaming services are the big differences for a child growing up now. And I don't think that I'm just reflexively embodying an attitude of, ugh, back in my day things were better, when I say that that is actually not a positive development for children. In fact, to illustrate this point, I decided in the middle of writing the script to go ask my dad about this, and he said that he didn't think there were any technological advancements when I was born that he considered to be negative developments. In fact, he said he would have liked it if he as a child had access to the video games that I had growing up, because video games are really fun, and my dad actually does play some video games now because they're really fun. And when he was growing up, he used to play with board games, which he said was a way to fill a void that if he'd been born slightly later would have been filled by video games instead. Although the one positive he did say about having to play board games instead of being able to play video games is that it meant that you had to go meet up with your friends so that they could play board games with you. You had to be sociable. Indeed, both my parents mentioned the fact that you had to go ride your bike physically around town to go meet up with your friends because that's the only way you could hang out. So there is always going to be some trade-off. The ability that the 90s brought with video games to be entertained on your own made it much more easy to tolerate being a social recluse, which is not necessarily a healthy thing. I don't usually do calls to action in my videos because you guys are generally so good at that I don't think it's necessary. But in this case, I genuinely want to know in the comments what your opinion is on this issue. How do you feel about when you were born relative to the generations before and after? Do you feel like you had a lot of advantages in your childhood that other generations missed out on? Anyway, so I think despite the trade-offs that do allow me to understand why growing up in the 70s or the 40s might have had a unique charm that people might have appreciated, I nonetheless am quite firm in my position that the 2000s were decidedly a goated time to be a kid. What I then need to justify is my belief that it was all downhill from there, and I'm going to appeal to one show to make this point. Doctor Who. More to the point, I'm thinking about Saturday evening TV, and of those shows, even though it doesn't particularly interest me now as an adult, I was very into Doctor Who as a kid. And I remember the moment when a show would end, maybe even on a cliffhanger, and I couldn't wait until next week. But I had to, and I'm glad I did, because I remember how much more exciting it was to finally get to next week and get to see the next installment. And it wasn't just about the delayed gratification, it was also the fact that hard drive recorders weren't really a thing back then, so if you wanted to record something, you had to set it to record using a videotape. So unsurprisingly, most of the time, people didn't record things. The way that you watched something was by making sure that you were at the TV when it was scheduled to be on, and there was a sense of urgency about the fact, alright, the show is on now, everyone let's gather around and watch it. Both my parents specifically mentioned one of the things they loved about their childhood was that when they were growing up, because there was only one TV in the house, TV time was family time. Everyone would gather around and watch it, even for child-friendly content. Now, when I was growing up, my parents had a small TV in their bedroom, but still there was only one main TV, one screen that people could go to be entertained. So again, there was a sense of community, of the family coming together to watch something. And I mostly associate this with Saturday night, because that was when everyone would gather together around the TV and watch what was on. And it's insane how different things are now. Shows are often released just as one whole season intended to be binged, and even if that's not the case, we have on-demand streaming services, so even if you didn't watch something when it originally came out, you can watch it whenever. And because of streaming services, when it comes to watching TV now, there is no sense of urgency or occasion or immediacy. Everyone has several screens to a person now, so forget the idea of all needing to gather around the TV to watch something together. Plenty of families don't even own TVs now. The kids will watch something on their iPad and mum and dad will watch something on their laptop. This is a totally different world, and I do think it's a decidedly worse one. I've never seen a time period later than the early 2000s subject to nostalgia. Now you might say, well, this is because like 2010 was too recent, so obviously people aren't going to be nostalgic about that. I don't know, time will tell. But I wouldn't be surprised if the 2000s has a lot of staying power as the last time that people will feel truly nostalgic about, because it was the last time before smartphones. Like I say, my parents both mentioned the need to ride around on your bike in order to go hang out with your friends when they were young, but my dad actually remembered that was true of me too. Admittedly, I was slower in picking up social media and smartphones than some. It wasn't until I was 14 that the internet and my frequent access to it became a significant part of my life. Prior to that, I can remember that the way I would hang out with my friends is that I would cycle over to them and we would go play football. Am I supposed to feel anything other than gratitude that we weren't just hanging out in a Discord server? These might all seem like incredibly obvious points, but I've been ruminating a lot recently on how generations have changed and how things are much different for the coming generation, probably because I'm considering having children myself in a few years. And as such, I find myself thinking, is there any way back from this? Is there something we can salvage of how growing up used to be for the generations of the future. You might notice this video has nothing to do with the trans issue. In fact, as I sit here recording this, I'm quietly terrified that this video in fact has nothing to do with anything. Like, I've made other videos about non-trans issues before, but usually they're about big topics like religion or capitalism, not the relative merits of different childhoods. But let me salvage some degree of substance from this video and say that I do think it gets at an interesting point, which is the rise of freedom brought about by the information age and how that might not actually be a good thing. And yeah, this could be related to the trans identity issue. There's this meme about how before the internet, if you had a stupid idea, everyone around you would just tell you it's a stupid idea, whereas now you can find an entire community of people who'll support your nonsense. See, I have this philosophy that always doing exactly what you want can lead to a profoundly miserable life. Like, imagine if you only did what you wanted to do and you never did what you don't want to do. Well, every single morning, I don't feel like getting out of bed. I have to force myself to get out of bed. So if I didn't do that, then every single morning I would be oversleeping and I would massively mess up my sleeping schedule. I really hate traveling, so I guess I'd never leave my house, which sucks because maybe there are things to do in other places that I'd want to do, but unless I'm comfortable with forcing myself to do things that I don't want, I'd never be able to do those things. And I'm saying all of this as someone with a relatively high amount of self-discipline. I realize there are some other people out there who would think nothing of eating an entire tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream while binging an entire season of lowest common denominator trashy TV. Do we have too much freedom as a society now, or rather too much ability to exercise our freedom thanks to the opportunities that technology affords us? Probably. The most obvious solution to this issue is self-discipline. Like, if the world is giving you the ability to do anything, then you have to be more discerning in terms of what you want to do. This is very relevant to parenting. I don't think it's a coincidence that I've been thinking about this issue constantly, and I am planning on having children within a few years. While my dad could say, hey, have at it, Junior, safe in the knowledge that there wasn't anything radically different about technology that would make the world a fundamentally different place for me when I was young than it was for him. For me, it's not so easy. My kids are going to be growing up in a world where there is an entire industry out there intended to completely destroy young people's attention spans by overstimulating them. I'm not someone who has an issue with television as a concept. Television's been around for so long that it's basically a traditional institution at this point. I hope I have lots of evenings sat around the TV with my family watching shows and films together, but my personal attitude is that kids can have quite a generous amount of TV time, but they have to actually be watching quality TV that's been tried and tested by time. So, you know, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Arthur, if you want to be a bit more British, Postman Pat, Fireman Sam, things like that. And I don't think this is me having some unrealistic expectations of being this super parent who's going to be able to navigate all these issues and put those other parents to shame. No, I just think this is actually pretty easy. Like, don't give your kids a tablet with internet access. It's not that hard. Also, even reading isn't that hard. For kids at least, every parent I know has been able to introduce their children to books and have them incorporate happily, eagerly, reading regularly into their routine. It's only when we become adults and we get a little less disciplined with managing our attention span that we just give up on reading books entirely. The proportion of books behind me that I've read recently is horrendously low. The other thing I have to mention if we're talking about how society has changed is religion. I will say right now that I don't agree at all with the Jordan Peterson notion that religion should just be a self-help tool.
Well, the belief that Jesus rose from the dead is actually a metaphor for the fact that you should clean your room, bucko.
No, only profess to believe a claim about reality if you actually believe that claim about reality is true. But honestly, while I used to think it was kind of cringe, I now think that becoming like an atheistic Buddhist, if you're not convinced by supernatural claims, is kind of a reasonable thing to do. Or, you know, become an atheistic Catholic. There are so many religions that are way more about the ritual and the tradition, such that whether you actually believe it's true isn't even that important. Or, you know, have some kind of personal routine that's evocative of religiosity, even if you just made it up and it's entirely secular. I've heard it pointed out that the way that some people prepare their coffee in the morning is comparable to a Eucharistic Catholic mass, and yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate. But the reason I frame this in terms of religiosity is because I do think that in a world where we can do anything, we should live as if there is some sort of higher purpose, even if we don't in a metaphysical sense think there actually is. We don't want to totally fall into nihilism and postmodernism, where we become convinced that ultimately nothing means anything. That won't end well. Anyway, so the final thought I have on this whole like new generations are just getting worse and worse and worse is that, well, this is why I'm not a libertarian. I mean, the overarching theme of everything I'm saying here is that choice is bad, structure is good, freedom is terrible, discipline is fantastic. So yeah, that's why in my world, the term social engineering has always been a good thing. Like, wow, you're engineering society? Awesome. Good move. Society seems pretty shit otherwise. But you know, obviously like good social engineering. Like I think that state schools need to mandate more reading for students. They need to assign students way more reading at a younger age. They need to be obligated to do more sports, you know, basic, good, healthy, structured activities. I also think there should be more state control over how we celebrate traditions in our society. When should the local councils start putting up Christmas decorations? That decision should come straight from the tippy top, and it should be not a moment before December 1st. Ditto for Christmas music in shops. I realize that all of this might sound quite lukewarm as far as takes are concerned, but I actually think it's very important. The greatest role of the state is to combat individualism and provide structure through a robust group identity. And yes, if you want me to end this video by relating it to the main focus of my channel, I absolutely do think that considering how we're going to organize society with a specific mind to the fact that living in the information age has afforded future generations far too much freedom, far too much choice, to the detriment of their mental health. And as such, it seems obvious to me that if society was structured in a way to redress those concerns, then that would massively reduce the number of people coming to consider themselves trans. Nonetheless, while I think this video did have a point, I'm going to be honest, it completely destroyed my motivation for the majority of this week, because I was sat there thinking, is there really any point me saying all of this? Isn't this just kind of dumb? So yeah, I basically felt like a good half a week behind on the work that I was supposed to be doing. I don't know, I guess to boost it in the algorithm, I'll return back to that call to action. Let me know in the comments, how do you feel about when you were a child? Do you feel that you lived in the best time? And I don't just mean, you know, like, do you think that's just like a subjective thing? Or do you actually think in an absolute sense, it really was just the peak when you were a child? Because like I've said in this video, I genuinely think that for me. I really feel like there was advantages that I had being born when I was, and I really don't feel like I've missed out on anything since. In fact, I think that very much society has got much worse for children since then. I will say, by the way, that I've been inclined to make even more random, pointless videos recently, and I've actually been thinking, so essentially, for those who don't know, I had a vlog channel, and on that channel, I have uploaded 2 vlogs, 2 I would say thoroughly entertaining vlogs. So you should check them out. One is basically just a Christmas thing, I guess vlogmas as some people call it, although I believe vlogmas is when you upload every single day of Advent. This was just one video uploaded after Christmas, but it was about Christmas. And the other one was also a very fun video, which was going to every single county town in the East Midlands. So there's Nottinghamshire, Leicestershire, Derbyshire. Well, we went to Nottingham, Leicester, Derby, and we documented it. And I think it was, again, a very entertaining video. And since then we've been going on all sorts of trips. But the problem is, you know, I want to make the videos good quality. I want to edit them so they actually look good. And that takes quite a bit of effort to compress a whole trip where you're filming all sorts of different stuff and you've got to like really think through, how can I present this in the most entertaining way? So because of that, and the fact that the videos weren't super successful, I'm like, I should wait until, you know, like I'm doing really well on this channel, or essentially I'm in a position where I can justify taking the time it takes to edit those videos. But I recently thought, well, you know, I've got all these crazy ideas in my head. Why don't I just have that channel be somewhere where I will present all sorts of, you know, like my thoughts on issues that maybe it's not really very political, it's not appropriate for this channel. And this is the kind of thing that maybe could have, like, I easily could have reworked this video to be very much just like a lifestyle vlog thing. Hey, here's me talking about, you know, what I think about when I grew up compared to what it was like when other people grew up. But there are many other like video ideas I've been thinking of where I'm like, actually, you know, this is an observation I have about society that really wouldn't be appropriate for anything other than an old style, sit down, talk to a camera about life and, you know, my meditations on it. So I was like, yeah, I should do that. especially because my wife and I are going to be, hopefully within a month, have moved into a new house. I might not immediately start filming videos in that house because I'll still be close enough to this house, which is my parents' house, that I can record here, and that actually might be a nicer thing because I've got a slightly nicer setup. I'm not sure what the internet will be like, stuff like that. There may be a transitional period. But, well, transitional period, right? That could be a fun thing to do. A vlog, like documenting the fact that we're in a new house, all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, yeah, I think that would be a good moment to really launch that vlog idea. So I'm not really planning on doing anything about it until a month from now. But having said that, a month from now isn't that long. So if you want to go check that out, then you can. I'll leave it in the description. Anyway, sorry, the one thing I haven't done yet is said that, of course, I do Patreon. And if you give on Patreon, then you can see bonus videos. Here is a clip of a bonus video.
Banda's agent has also spoken out saying that she was assigned female at birth. She is a cisgender woman. But yet again,
obviously, it's worth noting, cisgender does not, cisgender doesn't really mean anything, but insofar as like cisgender means not trans, the defining feature of that is not how you were assigned at birth, it's whether you are actually biologically male or biologically female. Trans ideologues use this term, like assigned at birth, in order to avoid the fact that like there is a genuine reality to biological, because one of the things that obviously they kind of have as a problem is they want to say biological sex basically doesn't exist. The categories of like it's a spectrum, it's almost like subjective, whatever, but at the same time they know that like they actually have an investment in preserving the categories of cis and trans because that's how they're able to like claim victim, right? Like if you essentially say biological sex means nothing, well then I guess we're all trans. But then that means trans people can't do their little oppression Olympics thing. So they have like this category of cis, and the way they define that, so they don't have to anchor it in biological sex, is what were you assigned at birth. So if that looks entertaining, then you can give for just a small amount on Patreon. And yeah, the other thing you can do, obviously I gave a shout out to 2 of my other channels. I had this like idea, I don't know exactly how aggressive I'm going to be with it. I call it the, you ever heard of King Critical? Well, how about Emperor Critical? I can't remember when I gave this a shout out specifically, but essentially, obviously a king just manages one realm, but an emperor manages many realms. And my logic is, well, you know, I'm a king on this channel, but what I need to do is try and push harder to conquer other realms. So sure, I'm talking about the gender critical issue, but I recently started a religion channel. You should go check that out, Rom510. All these things, I think I've got like a featured channel section. So you should check all this stuff out. You should go there, you should subscribe, but then you should also watch the content. And again, as I've said, if you care about the gender critical issue, even though this video isn't really about the gender critical issue that much, but that's because I felt like talking about it, come on. Anyway, then it will proliferate the ideas, because people who maybe are interested in media review stuff or religion or just like lifestyle travel vlogs will be like, oh, okay, cool. But here's this other stuff. This is making me think about the trans issue in a way I hadn't before. That's the logic. We'll see. Anyway, Emperor Critical. That's what I'll do. We'll see how aggressive I am about it. But I'm being aggressive about it now. Go. Spread the word forth. Bye.